Cool. We are live now. So we are back with another episode of SuperRare Spotlight. Today I'm interviewing the collector Zonted. He's very prolific on SuperRare and all-around sweet guy. Bernard, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit to the people?
Hello, Eric. Or Nathaniel. Thanks for having me on this show. I'm the person behind the Zonted collection. Got started in crypto in 2013, actually. Bought my first piece of physical art, I believe in like 2011. There's a little story behind that, but don't need to go into that in detail yet. And got sucked into the whole NFT rabbit hole like 4 or 5 months ago at this point. And I've been terribly addicted and loving it. And it's been a great time. So I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks again, man. You said you're at work right now, so I appreciate you taking the time out of your work day and going live for all the community here to see. So I guess one of my first questions is the name Zonted. How did you choose that? Where did that come from?
There's so many stories. So I graduated college in 2010, and before going to college, I went to a very nerdy high school called the Texas Academy of Mathematics and Science, which is a high school that you go to, like you apply for, and then when you get in, you go to college for 11th grade and 12th grade. So I went to college, and a bunch of the people there, you can imagine, were just straight up nerds, academia folk. And we played a lot of video games. We're talking about back then, like Dota 1, Counter-Strike, and StarCraft, of course, Food War. And you would pwn people, except we would misspell pwn, right? And you would like own pwn, and it became like haunted, and then you wanted somebody, and then at some point we were like, oh, you like zonted somebody. And so I like bought zonted.com, and we just used it for like internal memes. We like coded up some like PHP platform, like, oh, who's the nerdiest like gamer? And I just held onto this domain for the longest time. Like did some sort of a photo sharing application on it at some point, and that didn't really work out. And so when I was diving deep into, Nifties, I was like, oh, well, Zonted is like the perfect thing. I have the domain for it, and it's something that is unique enough that people can like just say, oh yeah, like Zonted, and know what it is. And it's also just like you could also type it out, and it makes a lot of sense. So I was like, let's go with that.
Yeah, that's pretty serendipitous story. I like that a lot. I like the growth from the pwning days of Dota 1 back in the college all the way to the full premier digital art collection.
Awesome. Yes, that's how it goes.
Cool. So yeah, another one of my questions, which you kind of already answered a little bit in your intro, is I was going to ask when you started collecting art and if you collected like traditional art before NFTs.
I did. So that's another story that I feel like one needs to hear from somebody who like collects art. I was going to a macarons like cafe when macarons were all the rage. Again, this is now like in 2010, and there was this piece of art that was called Later Haters, and I guess I'll like find the picture of it, share it on Twitter after this.
Yeah,
but it's this picture of this like kid who is like holding a kite and flying up, and the kite is like a star, and it's called like Later Haters. And I like saw this piece, and it's like $140 at the patisserie, and I was like, that's a really nice piece. And I had never, bought art or anything before then. Mm-hmm. And then I distinctly remember that night, I went home, I went to bed, and I had a dream. And this dream, I went back to the cafe, and that piece of art was gone. And I was like horrified. I was like, oh my God, like this
I'll
is
never
like
see
the
it
saddest
again.
thing. Right. I'm never gonna see this again. So after I woke up with like a cold sweat, I was like, I need to go to this patisserie and buy that piece of art. And I did. And, you know, $140, this is like in college, it's like, that's was quite a bit of money to spend on
Sure.
an
Yeah.
art piece. And people are like, well, that's cool. Like why did you get that? And it's like, I had a dream where I was horrified that it was gone. So I had to get it. And they're like, huh, that's interesting. And so that was my first foray into collecting art.
That's really cool, actually. I feel like that's, when people collect art or when people just appreciate art, that's like, the driving factor behind all of this. And I think your collection is a really prime example of that. And it's cool that it all started with that dream of you not being able to acquire that first piece.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I think that once you've had that sort of ethereal experience with art, I think that you it's just it changes the experience completely. I think that a lot of people who have not had that sort of experience would look at art or say NFT and be like, well, I could just, save image as, and it's the same thing. It's like, well, you just don't get it.
Yeah. And, even myself as an artist, like when I first came into the NFT space, I had that same thing where I was like, why would anybody want to pay for something that they can just see? And then now I'm starting my own little collection of art, and it's
Good.
like a whole thing. Like it's hard to describe, but
It's hard to
it's
describe.
a good feeling buying art and then just like looking at your collection and being like, that one right there, number like so and so of this edition is mine.
It's
Like I was
yours.
there. It's like it's a cool way to document like your life and the history of the art world, and it's a great little like memento piece for all sorts of things in life. I feel like in years from now I can go back and look at a piece of art that I purchased and know exactly what was going through my head when I purchased that piece of art.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great way of putting it. I think that I've felt that, but I haven't been able to articulate it in that specific way. But it's absolutely true. And I think that's also why when you talk with specific collectors about their pieces, there is that emotional attachment, right? It's like,
Mhm.
oh, I was in that state at that point. It made me feel this way. And that's why I had to get out of bed to make a bid or to like get it, and
Yeah.
like it's relinquishing that piece, if you will, to somebody else feels like relinquishing something personal, something like a memory of sorts. And I would expect that it's sort of the same way when an artist creates a piece of art. It's like you're putting a piece of yourself into what you're creating, and to have that be collected by a collector is also a very like extremely personal and emotional sort of experience. But it's like from the collector's point of view, it's the same sense, but instead of from a creation like emotion connection, I think it's a consumption emotion connection, which is
Mhm.
like watching like a really gorgeous movie. It's like
Mhm.
seeing a gorgeous piece of art is that same sort of like paradigm.
Yeah, yeah. I have the same dichotomy in my life with music where like I write music and whatnot, and I have that cathartic release in music in the same way I do with art. And then, but listening to music is so different for me, where I like, there's songs that I listened to 10 years ago in that same sort of way. I can remember what I felt like when I first heard that song or first heard a certain album or something like that. And it's a powerful thing. That's what
It's
that's
it
what that's what
is
art is.
truly,
Um,
truly.
yeah. So, what was your story coming into the NFT world from the traditional art world or the traditional math world?
Absolutely. Yeah. So 2013, got into cryptocurrency. Was fortunate to buy my first Bitcoin at $140 because I moved out to Silicon Valley, joined a Y Combinator startup. It's not Coinbase, but the founders there were like, "Oh, Bernard, you need to buy Bitcoin. We got in at $7." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, let's go. 140." And then we set up like crypto miners. They bought A6, Butterfly Labs. If you were in like crypto back in the day, you would know the name because they like were accused of, because at that point crypto seems to always be surging, but at that point it was like surging for what it was. And so they were basically accused of taking the crypto miners that they were going to sell people and using them and then shipping them off before you got it. And so there's this whole like fiasco, and we're like, all right, let's not do that. Let's get our own GPUs. And like San Francisco had just a dearth of GPUs because everybody was like doing it. And then we like mined a bunch of coin, and that was all fine and dandy. But I then went off and did my own like technology startups, and during certain points in that time frame I was very, very poor, so I had to sell the majority of my cryptocurrency holdings for not that much to pay the bills. And then it wasn't until like the last year-ish where the company that I was working at is doing really well. So I had a lot more spare capital, started funneling a lot more of that into Bitcoin, Ethereum after the March crash, because I was like, oh, this is a perfect time.
Good time. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, just degenning with like one of my crypto buddies, because I have a lot of those. And we got on to talking about Whale as a token. It was like announced, and like it was like, oh, this is so revolutionary. It's like a token that is like the value of it's tied to NFTs. And then I had no idea what NFTs were, but I was like, I know altcoins and whatever. So like, it's called Whale. Of course it's gonna do well. So I bought a good chunk of them, and then they did do well. And then I was like, okay, well, what is this like NFT thing actually? After Whale decided to like triple or something like that. So dug around, bought my first NFT like art on Maker's Place. And it was a piece by Bit Error called A Day on the Lake. And I remember it's edition 3 of 5. I spent, $60 on it. And I was like, hey, this is pretty cool. I like changed my phone background is exactly like that piece here. I changed my phone background to that piece. And I was like, I guess this is pretty cool, right? I can say that I own the background image of my phone.
Right.
And then, I was like, okay, this is still interesting. I dug around a bit more. And then I think if one does their research in NFTs, one will usually end up at CryptoKitties and then CryptoPunks. So I ended up at CryptoPunks, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. Like, if NFTs as an industry is going to do well, then CryptoPunks is going to do well. So this, instead of like investing in Whale, I should just be buying CryptoPunks, because this is the like kind of benchmark, if you will, of the NFT space. So I bought like 20 punks, and I got addicted to like crypto. So I bought some of the like, at the time was like really crazy. I spent like 50 ETH on like this tiara that had a gold chain, and it just was like filled with gold. And I was like, oh, this is like an S tier punk. So I feel a little bit crazy because you could buy a car with like 20K, but I'll just buy this. And then I like bought a beanie as well, because it's like, this is the rarest attribute. Like, this is the cool thing. The
cool thing about like even like you know, like degenning like that a little bit and just like throwing this internet money at these images is like half the time it will end up making you money. So like you can kind of rationalize it a little bit.
Oh, totally, totally. But yeah, so that was my, oh, right. I had the little to build a little bit on this story. So then I was like, okay, I have these like 20 CryptoPunks, and then I was like, but how do I like show people that I have these CryptoPunks? So
Right,
I
right.
started looking into the metaverses, right? And like Decentraland, CryptoVoxel, Sandbox was just selling their land at that time. I was like, oh, this is cool. So I got into crypto voxels, and then I bought like the corner parcel of Origin City because I was like, oh, well, like, why wouldn't you buy the corner parcel? It's got to be like
Corner
dope.
spots are nice, man.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's two sides of water.
Yeah.
And then I like built because I played a fair amount of Minecraft. I like built the thing, put the CryptoPunks on there, and except I had like more space. So I was like,
Yep.
well, I need to fill the rest of this with more art-like things. And then I ended up back on Maker's Place in SuperRare, and
Nice.
I bought a bunch of art.
Yeah, cool. Well, that segued beautifully into my next question, which was going to be about your CryptoVoxels plot and your premier digital art gallery, which I visited a few times already. Everybody, you can go to Zonted's Twitter and be able to find this. I'm not sure if there's a link at the top there or anything, but I'm sure you'll post something after this interview. That's cool. If people want to go check that out, there's a lot of cool art in there, and I can see the old Minecraft mindset, you know, coming into play there and making a really cool spot.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I would, I guess, is there a question?
Well, I was gonna ask like what the end goal of this gallery is. Like where do you see it going in the next few years? Is it just to show off art? Is it just to have fun? You know, what's your mindset going into the whole gallery experience? Because you know,
Yeah.
anyone could go on your SuperRare Maker's Place and look at your art, but not everyone put together a gallery.
Yes, yes. So as I was getting sucked into the deep rabbit hole of NFTs, I bought books upon books, which I have shown you, like in, private DMs, where it's like, oh, collecting for love and art and money and Poor Collector's Guide and all of these things. And yes, the $12 million stuffed shark.
The Zonted recommendation.
That is actually a really good recommendation for a book in terms of a broad brushstroke across the economics of how contemporary art works. And the deeper and deeper that I got, basically you start to see like these fundamental things start to like pop up. One of them being, right, that the art and money are like kind of this weird inexplicably tied like relationship where artists are like, oh no, it's not about the money, except collectors are like, oh yeah, it's also really not about the money, except everybody looks at the money like it's a scoreboard, right?
Yeah.
And so it's almost like it's not about the money, but it is about the money. And in any case, some people will say in like those books, it's like, if you don't think it's about the money, you're wrong. Like something as like extreme as that. And, obviously other people have different opinions. In any case, what I learned was the core of all of this is that value, like digital art value or traditional art value, if you will, is determined by unique artistic expression. So this is like an artist's ability to create and convey some piece of work that is very novel and completely new. And that's why like your George Condos or your Francis Bacon's, right, or like the Yayoi Kusami or something like that are commonly cited, is because they came in and they had this really unique like style that they brought to the table that then everybody looked at and said, wow, that's amazing. I want to build on top of that. And it's
Yeah.
like kind of in the same way, that's fundamentally true in science as well, right? Somebody comes and they're like,
Sure.
oh, bacteria, kills this thing and we're going to call it penicillin. And everyone's like, oh man, that's like groundbreaking, right? As like this idea. And
Uh-huh.
so basically then, right, so unique artistic expression is like so important. And you see a lot of the top artists in the space where you can like walk in and be like, look at it and be like, oh yeah, that's a pack, right? Of course. It's very
Yeah.
distinct.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then the other part of the equation is simply exposure, right? You could have the most unique style in the world, but if you're only telling your best friend or your parents about it, yeah, it's not going to go anywhere, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
So you need kind of this platform to broadcast your unique artistic like expression to then get, well, value. And the entire premise then was that the majority of collectors in the space, at least at the time, were simply taking the art that they were collecting and stuffing them into the vaults, right? So really not adding or contributing anything to the ecosystem. And I said, okay, well, look, right, if I'm going to be collecting art and money is an important factor, right, for the players involved, then instead of being on the side where I'm not helping with exposure, I better be like helping with exposure, right? Because not only is it good for the artist, it's good for me, right?
Yeah.
Because if people like look at Zonted and they're like, wow, okay, like whatever they collect, that's like, good shit. Then it's gonna be good for the artist, it's gonna be good for me. And like, okay, I'm gonna hire like voxel architects. They are the best in the space, right? They just completed the like B12 or B20 project for Beeple and MetaCovid, and they've done projects with Whale Shark. So I like emailed Leandro, he's the guy at Voxel Architects. I'm like, all right, I want the best damn art gallery in crypto voxels, and I'm gonna build it across like 13, 14 parcels of land. Like,
Awesome.
let's go. And so that was the idea behind it, is like, instead of being a collector who just simply stuffed their collection inside vaults and like doesn't really help, give the artist more of what kind of support that they need. We're gonna make it such that like you go there and like the artist is like, wow, like I want to be here because this is like the place to be. So that was the premise.
Yeah, man. I think you nailed that. There need to be more collectors like you in the space, because you totally get it. It's a very symbiotic relationship between the artist and the collector, where if a collector has enough clout or enough recognition within this space, they can basically validate artists that they choose. And yeah, and then the artists, it helps them get better, and it's this back and forth. It's this conversation between artist and collector that you see it all the time in the traditional art world, where famous collectors, if they buy someone's art, all their collector friends are like, "Ooh, what's that? I want one too."
Totally. And when I first got started, that was exactly it, right? I like looked at Mode Rats, I look at Whale Shark. Who are the other, like, MoCA, right? The Museum of Crypto Art, right? You look at them and you're like, oh wow, they like Pack, like maybe I should like Pack too, right?
Yeah.
And so it's totally right. It's like, collectors to a certain degree are sheep-ish, right? Like to a certain degree. Like if you, it's the same in like startup, like investor mentality. It's like, yeah, I'll generally be a lead investor, but for the majority, a lot of investors are just like a flock of, we saw Andreessen Horowitz, very well-known venture capital fund, do like invest in that, then all of a sudden that company is way more valuable than if a no-name venture capital put money behind the same company. And it's like, okay, that's the same sort of paradigm that I wanted to breed with investing so heavily in one of the best digital art galleries in the space is that, okay, if Zonted like puts like some money or collects this artist or promotes this artist, then it's like a good bet.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Beautifully said, man. Yeah. I mean, it's if a no-name artist gets their art in the MoMA or something like that, then they automatically get elevated to a certain level. And it's cool that collectors can have that kind of power, I think, because there's a lot of really great artists out there. I think you've done something similar with Merkpin, which I love her art so much. And I think Christy Glass, another great example. I think you're watching this, Christy. Yeah, so with some great artists that I think you've played a pretty good hand in, like helping their careers and their exposure in this market, which is really cool to be able to do that for people, especially artists that you believe in. So that will lead me to my next question. How do you pick art to buy? Is it purely aesthetic, or do you take into consideration who the artist is, where they are in their career, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Oh, that's a grand question. And honestly, I think that for the most part, at least for me, it's a thing that's a constantly fluid sort of feel. So like
Mm-hmm.
when I first got started, I followed in the footsteps of the Mode Rats, the Whale Sharks, the Mochas, right? And like, all right, if they're buying that, then maybe I should buy that. Except like the problem is that usually you'll look at it and be like, well, I mean, that's already a lot of money. So I like can't like get even access to that. So you start like shopping around a bit. And I think that my style is not like, I know like DCL Blogger is a very well researched, very meticulous like sort of collector. He does his
Mm-hmm.
research, has his criteria and his framework, and then he hones in and like snaps up like, a set. And like I tried that for a period of time, and I was like, that's not my jam. I like to just like see see something and be like, ooh, that looks good, and then like collect it or make an offer for it.
Right.
And but that's to say, in the early days, I did some studying. I came from CryptoPunk, so I felt like there was this idea, like in collectibles, there's this idea of like a floor, right? It's like, oh, the cheapest CryptoPunk currently is 4 ETH, and that's a floor.
Right.
And before the call, we were talking a little bit about this. So I approached art in the same way. And I was like, oh, okay, well, there's a super rare floor. And I like sorted by the market, like lowest price. I looked through the floor and I was like, all right, that one doesn't seem like so bad as like a floor. And I like bought, a few of those. And then I realized that that is not at all how you do like art. Like that's how you do collectibles.
Right. Right.
I would say that that same idea, though, of a floor does exist within an artist, right? So, like, you'll look at a Hackatao and say, okay, Hackatao's floor, right, currently is like a pod mark for like listed for around like 15. It's like,
Yep.
okay, that's the like Hackatao floor. And so, from a collector's perspective, right, that's actually very important. That's what they're looking at, right? They're saying, oh, okay, that's like the Hackatao floor. And then they'll kind of do some research and say, okay, well, what from like the past 5-ish sales, like what are these selling for? And also who is collecting them, right? And so recently, Max Stealth just like snapped up like a bunch of Hackataos for about like 15 ETH.
Yeah.
And that's like what you want to see as like a collector. It's like, oh, okay, like Max Stealth is not fucking around. And if he's going in, if he's getting in Hackataos, then like that's a solid like play. So you start to like see like those as dynamics like shape up. And I would say that I've gotten to the point in the collecting where I feel like I'm not as like bound to the rules of how like the market ecosystem is playing out. I think that I've like been working to make Zonted a respectable enough brand where I would hope that when Zonted is like, oh, okay, like I'm gonna make an offer for this, that itself is like, people are like, oh, okay, like, oh, like Zonted's not fucking around. Like I need to get in on some of that. And I
Yeah.
started to see that as an idea is working out, which is great, because that's like exactly, I think, the like type of collector that I would like to be, is that I want to just do whatever the hell I want to do, and hopefully in that same vein, like make the tide of the artist and the artworks all rise at the same time.
Yeah.
So that's to say, in the early days, bought floor art, didn't understand that, then kind of graduated to saying, okay, well, I need to buy like some of all of the OGs, right? The Packs, the Hakataos, whatever, the Trevor Jones, and then graduated from that and said, you know what? I'm just gonna like create my own destiny and then buy whatever I want.
Nice.
So that's what we do.
That's what we did. Awesome answer, man. So I'm gonna have to wrap this up pretty shortly. I got another meeting to attend to soon, but I wanted to screen share with the SuperRare collection of yours real quick so we can kind of scroll through there. And I have one last question to kind of lead this off with. Google Chrome froze. Hopefully you guys can still see me here.
I can still see and hear you.
Okay. Well, everyone else might just have to go look at this collection themselves, and unless this fixes
Oh, here, I can do it. I can do it. If yours
perfect.
froze.
Yeah, all of Google Chrome is not responding right now.
Well, you're still here. It's still working. Let's go through.
Cool.
Take a look at this.
Cool. Yeah, my last question is, and I think you touched on this a little bit earlier, but what gives art value? Why do we see a discrepancy in art? It's, you know, in the name itself, non-fungible. Why do you think that is? And what do you think gives art value? Is it just aesthetics? Is it the career of the artists themselves? Is it that uniqueness that you were talking about, the unique expression? And everyone has a different answer for this and why they think art's valuable, but more in monetary terms, what do you think plays the biggest role in that?
Yeah. So I guess fundamentally, it is just simply supply and demand, right? There is like the part about art is that there's only one of it. Well, unless you get editions of it, in which case there's, well, those editions of it. But generally speaking, it's scarcity, right? There is very few pieces of art, and a non-trivial-ish amount of people that might want that art, ranging from 0 to a bunch of different people. So that said, I think what gives like art value is actually the idea that when somebody collects a piece of art, that they oftentimes will never let it go for less than what they bought it for.
Right.
That's it, fundamentally speaking, because they say, okay, yeah, like I like this, and oh, you like this too. Well, you know, I paid I guess like 2.5 ETH or like 1.1K for this one. It's like you have to do better than that if you want it, or else whatever. And in these like books about collecting, there's something to be said about, I forget how many Ds there are, but there's 3 or 4 of them. It's death, divorce, and perhaps some other one. But these are the cases where then art actually ends up being relinquished for the most part, right? It's like, you know, somebody usually bought a piece of art because they had some sort of emotional attachment to it, or perhaps just wanted to, you know, make some money or whatever. And so that's it. It's like in the art books, they describe this as like a price ratchet. Basically, once a piece of art is sold for a certain amount, it is rarely ever sold for under that amount, at least publicly. So that's why you'll see kind of when people are in distressed situations that they might let go of some of the pieces of their art. but they're not going to do it publicly. You're not going to see a publicly logged blockchain transaction. You'll just see that, for example, Zonted transferred this piece of art to Nathaniel, and that's it, right? And then you would have, transferred me some Ethereum, and it would have not been logged. And so when you look at then the price of art, it always looks like it's going up because that's how the market dynamics work. But that's it, right? And so I think from a just fundamental question, it still just boils back down to the two, both being equally important: unique artistic expression and exposure. It's like there's this like common, I think, like misconception, at least from the traditional art world, when they look at the Nathaniels, the Merkpins, the younger like Etienne Krauss, those of the world. They're like, these artists are too young. There's no way that they're going to be like successful, or not no way. It's just like, I'm not that interested. And I think that they're thinking about it incorrectly because it's in the past. I think you could look at an artist and say, okay, this artist who is 30 or 40 years old is, they're vetted, they're proven. And that's because it probably took a decade, 2 decades for that artist to get exposure, right? Because they have to go to like the different galleries, and it'll be like a very localized thing. And, maybe somebody would read a newspaper. In any case, the ability for an artist to gain exposure in the traditional art world was very slow back in the day. Definitely. And I think that nowadays, right, we got Twitter, we got Instagram, we got this YouTube thing that we're doing. And basically, I don't think that that's true anymore, right? The best artists are like increasingly becoming younger and younger and are surfacing way faster and faster. And I think that that's as a result of this ability for one to get exposure like a lot faster. So
shout out internet.
Yeah, totally. So that's my answer, is that it's still, you do want, in my opinion, to have the ability for anybody to look at your piece and say, okay, that is a Merkpin, right? That is a Hackatal. And I think that is very important. And also just like, don't rush that, right? Just because I'm saying it's important doesn't mean that you need to go, okay, I need to find that. It's like people take decades to find that, right? And it's not a matter of like, oh, collectors collect that, so therefore I should do that. I think that's like thinking about it all wrong. It's just like, I really enjoy creating this style of work, and therefore the more that I create, the more that you're going to get better at it. And then a collector is going to look at that and be like, oh, I really resonate with that. And that's like the better way to like think about it.
Yeah, like you said earlier, unique expression.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for doing this, man. That was packed full of so much awesome information. We'll have to do this again sometime, because I only got through like half my questions in this time period.
Totally.
You're invited on again sometime. I'll let you know if you're interested in that. Yeah, that was great, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Of course, thanks for having me, and of course for all of you wonderful people that have been leaving comments. I've collected from a lot of you. I appreciate you tuning in, and of course just making awesome stuff that I really enjoy nibbling at.
Yeah, thanks again to SuperRare for letting me jump on here and talk about pretty much whatever I want and to whoever I want. They're awesome with that. My Google Chrome and browser is still frozen. Lewis, if you're there, could you end the broadcast for me? Or Bernard, if you can click the end broadcast button for me. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today.
Thanks, y'all. I cannot end it for you, but I'm sure that Lewis or you force quit it.
We're just like stuck in limbo now.
Yeah. I don't want to leave you stuck terribly in limbo, but
I know. I could always just ape out my browser here. That might do it, but it might not.
Yes. Oh, man. All right. Well, I'm gonna leave and make it somewhat awkward for you.
Cool. Well, if we both leave, then I think I think it will end, hopefully. All right, man. I'll chat with you soon. Thanks so much for doing this. I think everyone had a great time today.